Hello and welcome to the podcast where we're exploring game economy design in all its facets, from the original kind of game feel, the way that we deal with rewards and difficulty, all the way up to long-term retention-based elements. And at the end of the day, what is commercial game design? So today I'm delighted to be joined by Feras. Feras, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
It's like, oh, hello everyone. So I'm Feras Musmar. I started working in the industry more than 17 years ago. So I started as a game designer in the first gaming studio in Jordan. I'm originally from Jordan. I've done game design there for about 4 years. And then I moved into a stint in actually financial consulting and investment banking because my bachelor is in finance. And there weren't a lot of gaming studios in Jordan. So I actually thought for a while that I'd never work in video games again. Spoiler alert, that changed down the line. So I did financial consulting, investment banking for about 4 years. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it quite a bit, but my calling was, I think, in making video games. So I packed everything that I have, moved all the way from Jordan to New Zealand, to the other side of the planet, to work at Gameloft as a game economy designer there. Back then, they were looking for someone who has a background in game design and background in business, which wasn't so common. So they were willing to ship someone all the way from the other side of the planet to New Zealand. I spent a couple of years with, a little bit more than a couple of years with the Gameloft, working on freemium mobile games. Then I joined another local startup called Artrix, also working on freemium mobile games. After spending in total 5 years in New Zealand, I got reached out by DICE in Sweden. And they were looking for an economy designer to join them to work on AAA games. They were working on Star Wars Battlefront 2 and Battlefield 5 back at the time. So I moved over to sunny Sweden and been there since then. I moved up from being an economy designer to eventually becoming a design director responsible for all the engagement features on Battlefield. So anything that's called progression, economy design, live service, battle passes, etc. Anything that's not explosions and guns, basically.
Well, we'll have to get at some point. We'll have to work out how far we want to get into Battlefront 2 or not, because obviously that game is quite infamous in terms of the monetization side. But I mean, my aim here really is to get to the bottom of your journey and what you've learned through that process that other designers can take away from them. So, I mean, starting here in terms of like the economy side is you're starting from a basis of looking at fundamental financial systems. And how does that kind of like experience of working in kind of investment finance spaces, how did that translate to you then looking at the problem of understanding how a game functions and then the commercialization of that game?
Sweet. So it's very similar to any problem, I guess, in game design, which I guess it will come out a bit like straightforward when I say it. Economy design is basically system design, and system design is like a lot of other game design disciplines. So if I'm approaching a specific problem in a game, I usually, especially now as more of a director, I try to specify the goals and the player motivations we try to hit from that feature, or what is that problem we're actually trying to solve. If we can attach metrics to that problem, even better. Like that's already more than 50% of what you need to do. And then you look at the genre that you're in is something that is very important as well. If you want to implement new features or something that's groundbreaking, it's always better to do that or innovate usually in areas that aren't as risky. So if you're playing around with features that impact player retention, or you're playing around with features that, for example, are more innovative on the creative side rather than focusing on player retention, that sounds really good. It might be a bit riskier when it comes to commercialization. So
absolutely.
So that would be my
retention
general
is
approach.
key, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly, because if you secure the players in the game, you don't need to be extra sexy when it comes to monetization. Well, there's always ways to be extra sexy with monetization, but that should never where you should be starting.
Yeah.
The other thing is you look at the systems overall in the game. So a lot of people look at economy design as you balancing a system that already exists. And I found that a bit trickier to do versus if you own the systems and actually can deepen them.
Yes.
I think that's usually something that's very important. So you start with that. You start with looking at the overall system. Where does that feature or the problem lie? The goals from it, and then we usually start fixing it.
And I think that's a really interesting kind of way of looking at it, because at the end of the day, a lot of people are brought in to do monetization design. I know I've ended up being kind of like brought in to rescue a game. Often it's not the monetization itself, it's the other things like the first time user experience. Because if we haven't got the player engaged yet, then the things that make the monetization appealing inherently aren't visible because no one gets there in the first place. And I think that's kind of one of the weirdest challenges in some ways about getting economy right is getting the players to care is the first step of that. Does that make sense?
100%. I think this is why also when I talk economy design with people, like especially if they're on the team as designers, I usually try to approach it not even from the monetization
Mm.
perspective, but from the player experience perspective. Like there's a lot of games, for example, like if you look at a game like The Witcher, it's not about monetization, but you need a solid economy in that game to be
Yes,
really fun. And how
absolutely.
you balance your economy, how you balance your reward system can change the player's behavior so much
Mm.
that you can actually either increase a certain activity from the player
Mm.
or reduce one really successfully. You can ruin the whole vision of a game or enhance it. And monetization is just like a subset of
Mm.
that economy design. It became very prevalent in freemium games because that was the point where you needed people that specialize in the business aspect
Yeah.
and the design part. But inherently, almost all games have economy designers. And now I'm happy all of these games, even that don't have a lot of monetization with them, have economy designers that
Yeah.
specialize in
Well,
those systems.
for me, Skyrim is the classic example of the economy design that's broken. It's fine early on, but very soon when you get to sort of mid-level, the money is not an issue in Skyrim. It's kind of not the point of a game like Skyrim, admittedly as well. But it always struck me, and that had they put more effort into balancing that economy design, would I have become more invested in the crafting side? Would I have been more invested in the resourcing side? And it always struck me that that's an aspect of those kind of game designs where even if we're not talking about commercial retail elements of the game, the fundamentals of knowing the reasons for playing, the motivations for playing, the reward systems, to me, that's an essential part of balance of economy. So how do you go from how do you get to that stage? How do you think about that? And at what stage do you think about the money part? Do you think about that balance intrinsically on its own, or do you have to think of it more holistically?
Right. So it really depends on a lot of things, but let's start to go through them.
Mm.
So if you are building the game, let's say from scratch, it's not a live service game. Let's
Yeah.
start from there, and
Yeah.
you already know the business model of the game. Like for example, if your game's going to be freemium, you really need to start from the different monetization commercial aspects super early. If you know that your game is going to be premium and then the monetization aspects of it are just going to be something that it will generate extra revenue, but it's not the key revenue, you approach it a different way. And there's
Yeah.
the third part where your key part, the economy is not going to support any monetization aspects. If your game is a freemium game, you really need to start thinking about that from the beginning. You're designing the systems with that in mind because it has to correlate with the different systems, and you need to make sure your monetization is deep enough as a system. And by deep enough as a system, I mean that that system touches upon multiple elements or multiple other systems to deepen it. A lot of challenges you used to see in freemium games in the past that the game gets designed and then the commercial part gets
Yeah.
attached to it. Usually, you start with creating the game loop and the system of the game itself. And then you will get, hopefully, you'll get a creative directions from a creative director of the game. And you already know the genre of it. And then that's where the fun starts to happen in terms of you creating an economy and then creating a commercial aspect for it. So when it comes to creating an economy, you look at the genre of the game you're in, you look at what the players are familiar with it, and then you decide where you want to break the norm, what is the extra features you need to
Yeah.
teach for the players, and why you're deciding to add those.
Mm.
What is your reasons behind them?
I think that's interesting, particularly because it reminds me of one of the rules of design that Scott Rogers, when he wrote Level Up, talked about the triangle of weird. You got the characters, you got the mechanics, you got the world. You can change any one, but you can't change all three because you need a foundation upon which the players understand what's going on. And I think the same thing applies in terms of exchange, whether that's through play or whether that's through money.
Exactly. Yeah. And usually the common dominator actually that could control this exchange is time. So I found it way
Yeah.
easier to, especially if you're working on a freemium game, is that once you create your faucets, you create your sinks,
Yeah.
you design the systems in between them, you need to fix one of them while you're balancing the other. Like
Yeah.
if you try to always move them at the same time, the process can get very crazy. I've also noticed in my career in the past, you start usually with way too many of them. And then before adding more, you should start shaving and then balancing them. But then going back to the using time as a metric, I found that super important to balance the whole economy. So you look at time to level up, for example.
Yeah.
Money per time, like you can convert every minute into the game to a monetary value, but also to different currencies. And then you can decide the exchange rates. You start creating the economy from there. You use your XP also as a way to pace time. If you have XP in the game, usually a lot of games have different progression bars, etc. And using time as a common denominator across all of these things helps you really balance the economy commercially, but also progression wise. On top of that, it helps me a lot with session design. So you can decide the length of the session, and based on it, you know how many actions the players will take per session. If you want to reduce churn out from prolonged sessions, you control the economy that way as well. So a lot of things unlock themselves if you start looking at your economy in terms of like, here's the time players investing, here's all the stuff that are working around and they're getting and spending as a result of that. You start getting way more control, especially if the game is not out there. You don't have the data yet. You're always checking yourself. Then if you build something in the game that takes like a gazillion hour to be done, it's a good also sanity check for you overall. If you have done something really long, you can really easily see it.
No, exactly. And then you can apply data to that. You can look, because you know what activities are happening. You can put markers to that, trigger actions that can give you data points that this thing was done at this time, this amount of time was elapsed before the outcome of that occurred. Now I can look at, see what proportionate effort was put in to be able to get that output. And if I thought it was going to be 5 minutes, it turns out to be 3 hours, I've got a problem, depending on the we had one game where people were returning every 48 hours rather than every 4 hours.
Yeah.
And it killed the game in terms of its ability to monetize and perform. But it also killed the game in terms of clearly there was something in the game because they came back, but not enough in the game to come back quicker. And I think these are the sorts of levers that we kind of really are understanding something simple. I often refer to this like an anchor currency. So for me, I have an anchor, so something which can only be obtained through play. Like you say, XP is a good example of that. Most games have an equivalent of XP, even if it's not literal. Some equivalent progression tracking method is there. And I think that thinking of that as your anchor currency can only be obtained through play. This is the amount of time and effort to get to the next stage. Well, then now I've got my exchange rate mechanism that you're just describing. And if I have other currencies, they can be flavors of that currency. They could even work at different scale metrics to feel different, but they're essentially locked in, they're ratcheted in to this kind of simpler to understand, simpler to manage, because I have to manage every currency just in a minute to make sure that the first one works properly. Does that make sense to you? I mean, do you have tricks like that you apply?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of tricks around that. So, especially when it comes to applying currencies, for example, controlling inflation in a live service game is super, super tricky. Sometimes around X amount of years, if the game is running, you'll discover that one currency has blew up and then you decide to introduce another currency or introduce a massive sync to it. Another reason that you would introduce a couple of currencies is if you want to make sure the players don't ruin their own progression or you don't want to give them choice paralysis, you have different currencies that answer different motivation. That's a very good thing that served me multiple times. Another thing when it comes to like a trick that I started looking at a bit more when it comes to pacing in XP is early on in my career, I used to look at average XP for the players and then try to base things around it. But then over time, I discovered with some systems, it's way better to look at the median. The thing that I'm saying here is not like using the average or the median. It's just to be always careful about the number of players your feature is targeting.
Exactly.
Sometimes you'll have an average for a specific metric, like an XP per minute. That is not a normal build distribution. And as a result of that, if you build your pacing based on that, the less skilled player in the game might struggle. If you build the median, you at least know you're hitting 50% of the players. And then also you need to be careful the whole time when you design a feature that is trying to target a large amount of your player base in terms of pacing, that you also find ways to reward the skilled players to progress a little bit faster if your game is skill-based, or other ways if your game has other player motivations that you want to reward the players for. So sometimes, like when you are averaging numbers or taking medians, etc., there is no rule of thumb, but always ask yourself how many players are being hit or how much of your player base are being controlled by the spacing, and just double check if you're actually hitting the right amount.
No, I want to talk more about this, and particularly I want to go back in a bit to sinks and source or Sings and Fawcett
Yeah.
analysis in a bit. But before I do that, the tyranny of averages is something that comes immediately to mind to me when you talk about use of median versus the traditional average versus looking at kind of the maximum or the sort of 25th percentile player or the lower 5 percentile player. This kind of like distribution assumes a normal distribution curve. But I think quite often in games, we don't get a normal distribution curve. We often get multiple peaks. You'll get a main peak, but you might have the whole average might be completely slanted one way or another with a secondary peak, which makes the mean look like it's something that is less than 50% of the users. It might be like 30% of the users who actually hit the mean because there's this tiny percentage are getting huge numbers and this other percentage that are getting this other peak. How do you, I mean, do you go into that? Do you worry about the kind of non-standard deviation?
Yes, definitely. I would recommend not worrying about it when you first start. Like
Yeah,
when you first start designing the early parts of the system, you do some of the early balancing. That is fine, not to think about it so much. But then, and again, this is like other game development per genre, per whatever you're building.
yeah,
But usually, when you're getting a bit deeper, you need to look at the different cohorts you're expecting. Especially if you're making a
yeah,
game for a mass audience, you're expecting millions of players to come in with different player patterns. You have to break the cohorts. You have to look at and you can break them per skill, time investment, etc. Because like some players aren't so skilled, but they're willing to invest a lot of time in your game. Some players
yeah,
are willing to spend extra money into the game to progress faster, etc. And you need to decide how to break the cohorts. With XP earn, it's a bit easier because you can just break it based on the distribution, and then you
yeah,
decide here's the higher percentile, lower percentile, etc. But with other elements as well, you need to check who is this feature is for, and then you break the different
yeah.
cohorts because you need to ensure that regardless of the number of sessions the players are playing, etc., that everyone is keeping up. So yes, you would dive into it, but I recommend not when you start early on.
It gets too complicated if you try it too early, I think.
Exactly, because like you don't know if you need to do the third pass on the economy if the whole system will
Mm.
exist. Because you start with usually, at least for me, you start with something really big. All the numbers are also big,
Yeah.
etc. And
Cut,
then you
cut, cut, cut.
shrink and clean up, and then you
Yeah,
start balancing. Another thing you can always do, and I tend to do that with important parts of the game, is just you run a sensitivity analysis on your economy on the
yeah,
areas that you think are important. And if something is too sensitive, the numbers will show you really early on, and then
yeah.
you pay extra attention there.
So how do you approach? I mean, I want to talk a little bit about kind of how you define a cohort, but I'm interested now you've mentioned sensitivity analysis. What do you actually do to do that sensitivity analysis? So is it statistical analysis, or I mean, how are you actually looking at that? How are you making the assumptions about what sensitivity looks like?
So usually I would check the amount of time the player is investing in the game and how much, let's say, the earn rate will get fluctuated by that. And that would be a simple table where
Yeah,
like I'm changing the variables and just checking that. And I do that in Excel. Actually, most of my work when it comes to economy design has always been in Excel. Like obviously, I haven't built economy tables now because for the past 2 years I've been with TTK Games as a product director, and then I
yeah,
moved as a director back when I was at DICE. So you don't build things with your hand, but I was reviewing the sheets overall in my career, anyways. I always keep them simple when it comes to using Excel, and the scenario sensitivity analysis is also simple. You just check the key variables that you're worried about. Is
yeah,
it if it's related to, let's say, XP earn or currency earn, and then you combine it with checking against the number of sessions, and then you
yeah.
see the players that are playing, let's say, 3 sessions, how much are they earning versus the players that play six? That's, for
Yes.
example, sensitivity analysis. Why do I keep it simple? Because it will be show you the problem really fast, and then B, you can balance it and fix it faster. When the game is live, you have data scientists, you have a bigger team, you have all these like fancy charts you can look at and address things, etc. But when you're working early on in the game, it's better to keep it simple.
Yeah. I
So that's
totally
an
agree with that.
example of
Yeah.
a sensitivity analysis. Like I
Yeah.
always like double check.
I always take the view kind of the 80-20 rule. Like if I do something simple, I might fix about 80% of it in one hit. I'm not going to fix everything, and that's okay because that's what iteration's about.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, as long as I can kind of get to the pain point quickly. So let's go a little bit back and let's talk a little bit about how you define your cohorts. Because for me, I'm interested. I have different ways of doing it, but sometimes I'll look at like the quartile, so like the top 25%, the middle top 25, and then split out the percentage of spenders, so of those people contributing to the revenue of the game, split that into four groups, plus a non-spending group. And I'll use those five elements as one way of doing the cohorts. Sometimes I'll then split that out by retention. So those top 25% quartile who have stayed more than 60 days. Now that's when I'm getting a bit more kind of deep than I maybe need to most of the time. But there's lots of different ways of slicing how you're going to do your cohort. Is it the source? Is it the attribution? Is it the playing behavior? Is it just that they do the tutorial? Do you have any particular favorite kind of like go-to structures of how you break a cohort down?
Yeah, so if you're not necessarily looking at a problem, you're just looking, let's say, for a weekly report, or you're looking at a daily report to check the health of the game, retention is an amazing way to break the cohorts, and also the time they joined the game. This is standard. I think that's the easiest way.
A
And
number
to
of
be
days
honest, it's
since
one of the
install.
best ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you're trying to solve a problem in your economy, then you need to have different ways to break the cohort. So the thing you mentioned, if you're trying to solve a monetization problem, then breaking it via spend behavior is a good way to go. If you're checking, again, like skill metric, you're checking if some players are progressing too fast based on skill, or is it grind? Right. That's another way to break the cohorts. You can check there. If there's a metric that, like, for example, if you look at a game like Call of Duty, where you can get XP per minute, you can break the cohorts based on that. Are the players getting more XP per minute? And then you break them based on that. And then you check, am I answering to all the cohorts when I'm designing this curve or not? Are the players dropping out from an event that I'm running because only the skilled people are progressing on it? So if you're trying to solve for retention in an event, you would look at pacing, for example. If you're trying to solve for monetization, you would look at payment spend. So there's no standard way, but usually I would say it's if there's a thread that controls that feature. So if it's a progression bar, you would have to break the cohorts based on XP earn. If your feature is a monetization feature, what is the earn rate, for example, that currency, or the spend rate, and that's how you would break them. That was my approach.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me. And again, the reason for wanting to go into it is to make sure that people know that there are so many different ways of slicing, and actually context is everything. Yeah. With all these things. So let's go back again. Sinks and faucets is the term you use. Being English, we tend to say sinks and sources. Everyone has a different way of saying it. And so when you're looking at that, how do you analyze a game in terms of its sinks and sources? What's the approach that you take for that?
So it's a game that I'm making, or a game that's out there that I'm analyzing?
Let's say either way, yeah. But I mean, I'm happy to take, if you do it differently for both, that's even better to know.
Sweet. Yeah, let's take it on a game that let's say if you joined a team and already the game is out there, we can look at that. So again, the first thing that I do is literally just draw that chart where I have the faucets at the top, the sinks at the bottom.
Yeah.
And then you draw the lines between them. And then you can double check by then you know how deep is a faucet, how deep is a sink, by how many lines are connected. Super straightforward, boring stuff on a whiteboard.
You say boring, but it's not. I have a slightly, I break my same chart, but I break mine into different parts of the game. So I'll do like player related, gameplay related, progression related, reward related, offer related. That's the sort of principle I do. But it's the same thing. It's like I want to make sure there's at least one sink and one source for each of those things. Ideally, I want more sinks than sources.
Yeah.
Again, not necessarily, but you might get something from different behaviors, the same thing, but the net sink rate, for want of a better phrase, has to necessarily be at least as much as we get to put into it, if that makes sense. I mean, if anything, you want the sink rate to be slightly more than the amount of effort you put in to encourage you to do more. I mean, I'm exaggerating slightly, but that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. How do you look at it, more importantly?
Yeah, so I'm actually really happy that you mentioned motivations, because that was the next thing I was going to jump on. The whole point of actually having a source and a sink is to control player behavior. So that would be the next question you ask yourself. Is the currencies, or are they flowing where you want them to flow? Are the players, for example, like if you're making a shooter, are the players getting XP from actually playing the game, or are they getting XP when they're hiding in a corner and just throwing a frag grenade over and over again, right? So they're both ways is to gain XP. Most probably, if you've done something wrong, you can fix it. But that's
Camping works.
yeah, as long as they're having fun and everyone's having fun, it's fine. But you just double check, are the currencies doing the behaviors that you want from the player? Are the faucets moving to the sinks in the way that actually encourages the right behavior into the game? If a feature exists to, for example, encourage exploration, if the faucets are not done correctly, you might discourage exploration entirely. Like if you look at a game like Breath of the Wild, the way they have that durability with weapons, which I'm not a fan of that system, but it's a smart system because it
I
ends
love
up
durability. I think they go too far. Your sword is destroyed far too quickly.
yeah.
But the principle is something I love as long as it's firmly established right from the outset.
Yeah.
If you introduce it later, you're stuffed. You know.
Exactly, yeah. And because that system is smart, it actually results into the players exploring different playstyles. I think if you were like joining a game like Breath of the Wild live, and then you just look at the graphs and you realize, okay, we are breaking the weapons, so the players could collect other weapons, and as a result of that, we're encouraging exploration. You're not going to remove the durability system from the game.
Exactly.
And I approach economy design the same exact way. A lot of time, especially when you're joining a live game, you would notice that the lines get a bit funky because across the years, the designers have run into different problems. And sometimes you will see this often. There's a faucet and a sink, and there's just one line. And it's because they needed to solve a problem. They needed to ship something. They threw in a currency, and now you joined later and you need to fix this down the line.
And it's like, and they're the ones so often are the ones that rank up and become inflationary. In my experience, they're the ones that become the problem because nobody thought about the consequences of that, snuck in fix.
Exactly, and the players get upset because they're hoarding a specific currency. They don't know what to do with it. That happens in a lot of also freemium mobile games, and it's a problem with elder players because usually to make sure that at the end game the players have things to chase, you let them chase a different currency, but the base currency inflates. That happen a lot of time.
Well, isn't League of Legends has a particular issue with I forgot, was it blue crystals or something, where it's now so abundant that there's not enough characters to spend the money on, their currency on.
Yeah.
I'm not a player, so I'm probably mashing up the phrase, but
no, but I think I read that about League of Legends a while ago. I used to be a Dota player. I'm clean now, but but I've heard about League of Legends run into that. But also, to be honest, there's something that's not so popular that I like to also encourage designers to look at. Sometimes it's fine if you break your economy a little bit if the game ends up being more fun, because at the end of the day, and that's always to remember, as an economy designer, you are part of the design team and you're trying to execute on the vision of the game. And if your economy breaks, don't be precious about it. As long as the breaking doesn't break all of it and also doesn't ruin the experience for the for.
It's interesting because when you made me think about one of the experiences I often have is when I'm playing a game and I'm earning currency, but there's no equivalent of score. I will often resist spending the currency because I don't want my score to be dropping, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
And if that's the only way I can keep track of how effective I've been, it's a ridiculous inhibitor on me to spend that currency. So I think it goes kind of both ways. It's like understanding what the currency is, but the currency can often be something that you didn't think it was going to be.
Yeah.
If that
exactly.
makes sense.
And I think this is why it's very important to approach economy as a system design, because if you were responsible for the system, you would design a system where the player can show their veterancy in the game and then have a system that's just for that currency to spend it. In games like Elden Ring, they actually unified the vision so much. I'm a fan of Elden Ring, but I'm sure a lot of people are. Using the currency in the game, but in all of other like From Software games, as a way to increase the tension. So all the currency that you're holding, when you die, you lose them, you have to get them. That's an example of approaching economy as a system design, because now you're not thinking of the currency as just a currency. You're thinking about, this is my likelihood. I don't want to die. I want to level up. And then as you grow in the game, because the amount of currency you need to spend to level up increases, you carry more and more on you. The game becomes harder and becomes more tense. That's an example of economy design done. It's a
great principle. I mean, the idea of jeopardy being a fundamental motivation factor is, so when I try to think of about my sinks and sources, I start by trying to work out what do players want in the game. I'm thinking about, is there a subsistence factor, by which I mean like fuel or energy or something like that? Is there shortcuts, so power ups or weapons or whatever else, or armor, whatever? Are there social goods, so things that make me look good, feel good? And are there strategy goods, so sort of modes of play? They don't necessarily have to be full on modes. It can just be kind of like a different, like a difference between a shotgun and a machine gun is a different mode of style of play. So I think of those things as like the fundamental kind of principles from which I can then work out what are my things I want to get access to those utilities, those values. So my motivation to play, my intrinsic motivation to play is those are the things I want.
Mm.
The gameplay gives me the access to those. They're my sources. I then have to sync those, and I sync those through some mechanism. And it might be, I'm progressing, therefore I'm going to upgrade a weapon. I'm going to, go into combat, I lose health. There are lots of different ways I look at that, and they're my sinks, my force, my sinks. So that to me is tying all of those things and sources back into the motivation of the player. To me, is a quintessential part of understanding why someone's playing the game at all. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
yes, it makes a lot of sense. It's actually brilliant. This is why I think I like how the craft has evolved in a way. Like early on, when I first joined and I started like becoming an economy designer, economy designers were mainly just in Excel balancing the
Yeah,
numbers. But then when the craft lifted up and economy designers started looking at motivations, driving the player behavior, all that sort of stuff, it became like a much better integrated craft. And then the other thing that you mentioned, I was immediately thinking about it, is also figuring out when you're starting to put different rewards, different encouragements for the players in your resources. And then once the game is live, you realize that the players are gravitating towards some of them more than the other. And then you
yeah,
discover there's a general elasticity challenge that
yes,
you face. I think the example that I used before was you need to figure out what are the salt in your game and what is the beers in your game. And to explain that, like if you go to a store
yeah,
and then you find like salt on discount, you're not going to buy 10 bags of salt just because of discount. You're just going to buy what you need. If you already have salt at home, you're not going to buy any salt at all. It's not going to change your behavior whatsoever. If you go and you really like beer and beer is on discount, there's a good chance you purchase like a cartload of beers and take them back home. If you figure out what's in your game that will cause that behavior early on, you can really, really change what the players are doing based on the different rewards and the systems that you have in your game. Like some currencies, some rewards, some systems in your game are going to be boring, but they're
yeah,
necessary. And that's your
mm,
salt. And that's fine. The players will need X amount of it and they're not going to worry about it. Figure out what that is and then
yeah.
figure out what is the thing that's going to really excite the players. Ironically, usually you figure this out when the game is live. Like you usually have have a good idea
That's
of.
true. But that's why we do play testing, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. It's play testing is super crucial. So that's one thing that's also really interesting when it comes to development on mobile. Like there is soft launches, there is a lot of in-house data, all that sort of stuff. In HD or like AAA, most of the time you don't get a soft launch. Like you'll have in-house testings. Yeah,
It's
it is
crazy.
harder. It's way harder to balance
Yeah,
an economy when you're working on a game that will get globally launched for everyone on the same day.
yeah,
It's I'm not saying it's easier on mobile, but I'm saying in mobile at least you have soft launch and you can
yeah.
do some things. If you work on a game that's going to get globally launched without any soft launching, you need to rely on playtesting internally a lot. Like get everyone on the team to play, make sure you're getting someone to develop the tools for you to get all the data from them, balance it out, and then also make sure you find ways to test it out with external players. Either you get a group in or in your alphas and betas, because also what happens along the development cycle, the developers get better at the game, and then you're gonna set your pacing based on the developers, which is
But
tricky.
as a kind of trade marketer, my first thing about research was you can't have people who are on the inside. You can't get useful information, well, as useful information from people on the inside. You need people who are disconnected from you. So for
Yeah.
me, that's why in fact, in some ways, this is why I'm so delighted that particularly for mobile, I've used this for PC as well. There are online services now like Playtest Cloud and Antidote, which allow me to run the game with a bunch of people that haven't been recruited by me directly.
Hmm.
We did try and do some external user testing back in the days when I was at PlayStation, working on PlayStation Home, where we did have people come in and we ran focus groups. But they built a really quite impressive internal facility to do that kind of testing as well.
Mm.
But again, nothing seems to be the same as actual unmotivated, unotherwise motivated people who are coming because they want to play
Yeah.
for natural reasons, playing the game naturally. Anything that we set up as a test is intrinsically artificial, and therefore we should never quite trust the results. If is that
100%.
fair? Yeah,
Yeah, 100%. And it's not only that as well. Like you're setting up a specific test condition. You're influencing the players indirectly as much as you
yeah,
try not to influence them.
yeah,
But it's also going to be always a limited amount of time with a limited number of players. Like
yes,
once it's out there, and instead of, let's say you tested it with, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 players, sometimes 40,000. You get to do that sometimes, right?
yeah,
But the game is out, and on day one, now we have 3 million players playing it.
yeah,
3 million people are going to find something but that's the thing, like just the
yeah,
sheer numbers of people
yeah,
trying different things will let you, and you should accept that. It's actually a key part of you. On the way to the launch, you're doing all this playtesting, gathering the data, accepting that you're wrong about stuff and fixing it.
yeah,
But also what you're doing is you're setting a lot of server-side controls. Like it's
yeah,
also part of your role to make sure that the economy is sustained live. So you have all these server-side controls to change the
yeah,
sources, change the things,
yeah,
maybe switch off features if you need to. And this is super crucial because if you, as an economy designer, did not push for this, did not make sure it happens, and there's a big problem in the economy in the day one, you could really influence the whole game
yeah,
forever. Like there
yeah.
should be, like, if the currency explodes and the whole progression is not fun anymore, a lot of people will drop out. It's hard to get people back into the game. So it's on you to
And
make
on
sure this happens. Yeah.
and on Steam, it's brutal. Any issues, they'll destroy you. I mean, it takes really deep pockets to come back from some of those problems. Something I'm somewhat familiar with. The reasons I won't go into on this, I've gone into far too many times. But anyway, the point being, though, is I think what we talked about here is we've talked about the importance of tying the motivation
Mm.
to the kind of items we think about when we're thinking about things as sources, and we're thinking about a kind of a central currency exchange kind of process to
Mm-hmm.
simplify how we're going to think about the game, but then also thinking about the audience cohorts and the different behavior types, whether that's to do with the intense player versus the relaxed sedentary player, and how we make sure that each of these cohorts get good experience. So we've done a lot of that work. Let's say, imagine our fantasy game, we've done all that analysis. We've put it out, we've tested it, we think we've got a reasonably balanced game. Now we're going to start charging for things. Let's start at the basics. I think what you said at the beginning was choose the monetization model first. Now, a lot of people don't have that luxury, or they often come up with the wrong idea. A game that should naturally have free to play because it has ongoing costs, therefore it
Mm-hmm.
should, I would argue, have ongoing revenue, versus a game that may be a beautiful nugget of joy that's like, start, middle, and end. Why would you make that free to play? Because it ends. It doesn't make sense to make that free to play. So with those extremes, assumed, at what point do you really kind of firm up what this model looks like, how we're going to deliver it, how that commercialization of the game affects your balance that you beautifully crafted?
So it depends on how firm you can be while making a game, because things change all the time.
Exactly.
But usually you have a general idea in pre-production about the business model of the game,
Yeah.
and you have a general idea about what are going to be the monetization aspects of
Yeah.
that game in pre-production. And by I'm saying general idea, I'm not saying you specifically know the items, but in general the type of content that you're thinking about monetizing. In freemium games, it's a bit more detailed. In HD titles that are premium, usually you just have a general idea because you know what's in the market. And that's another thing that makes this decision a bit easier, unless you're making a game that has been never seen before and you're trying to monetize it, which is good luck anyways. But usually you know what's happening in the market, and it's really, really, really fine if you haven't fully figured out your business model early on, is to say it's most probably we're in this genre, these are the common trends in the market, we'll most probably do something like this in pre-production, and take it into the next level while you're waiting for the rest of the game to firm up and shape up. Because what's going to happen when you start production is, even let's look at, for example, like cosmetics as an example. You knew at the beginning that you will mainly monetize on cosmetics in your game. but you don't know which cosmetics are going to matter to the player. Sometimes, let's say if you're working on a shooter, sometimes you're not sure if that game is going to be a first person, third person, or a hybrid. And that by default will decide what are the things that are going to matter the most to the players to express their identity through. So if in pre-production you already decided, I'm going to sell all these things, these are the things that are going to matter, most probably you're going to be wrong. Start early, it's fine, you can put that list, but what's really important early on pre-production is the high-level things, actually. And then when you move into later, keep your eye on the loop of the game. See what are the things that are close to the game. If you're trying to monetize gameplay, then look at the things that are impacting the core loop, but not impacting it so much that the players that don't want to convert won't enjoy the game. If your game is going to be purely based on cosmetics and player expression, then look at the features that the players are going to be using the most, and as a result, the players are going to care about the most. And then you start because you need to also plan for the production of all of these things at some point. So I would say early production, you would have already framed up the general items that you're going to monetize. You delve a little bit deeper into the strategy. Later on in production, you would know the exact quantities of them. And then that will start to also inform your pricing as well. So if something is very expensive for you to make, let's say an item that's extremely rare to have in the game, usually those items are going to be also very expensive to make. And if you have a mismatch between those, so for example, you have an item that's very, very expensive for you to make as a developer, you're selling it for very cheap in the game, you're going to run out of it really fast, and then you break the cosmetic power curve in the game. So that is something that I always consider in terms of like, how much does it cost to make it? How many of it we can have? And then you can eventually price it as well.
I think what's in particular interesting for me, there's a kind of counterintuitive approach that I also have, which is based on how widely exposed are players to that thing, and therefore how much does that affect retention. So the thing in my mind is like level design is usually extremely expensive, but the thing we sell to people might be a database entry, health potions, ammo, whatever, progression, XP. But the fact that I create this expensive item at a level, I release that monthly or every 3 months or whatever the period is appropriate for that thing, if that has driven this much extra retention and by inference this much extra spend on the database items, that's worth giving away, because the effect of charging for that thing, that level, excludes so many people more than the value I would have gained from everybody playing it and using the consumables. Does that make sense?
That's actually a great point. Like, it's why if you look now at the like first-person shooter space, none of the shooters sell maps and DLC. Well, the big ones, they don't do that anymore because they want the players to be all in the same place engaging with the game. And if they want to monetize, usually they monetize on other things. Like Call of Duty is all about monetizing on cosmetics. All the maps, all the game modes are free because retention is very important. But at the same time, when you look at most probably they have cosmetics that are very expensive to make, and then the price gets reflected on that. But for sure, you need to prioritize your retention when it comes to, you shouldn't really charge for a level. I think that would be not so great for your player base.
Years ago, that was what we did. We sold level packs.
Yeah, there was DLC packs in the past. Yeah. But I think that's when live service games took off quite a bit. The DLC model took a backseat, especially PvP games. Like, it's still popular in PvE games like Destiny, for example. They focus a lot of the DLC packs, a lot of PvE games. I think with the PvP games, you want the players to play together in the same place. You want them to stay in the game. And
you don't get critical mass if you don't have everyone having access to it.
Yeah, exactly. And then sometimes you do monetization for retention reasons. Like, I feel Battle Passes is a good example of that. Like, the players do convert and purchase Battle Passes, but at the end of the day, a Battle Pass is a seasonal retention system. And sorry? Yeah.
No, sorry. And I actually go further. I think, I personally think Battle Pass is the best player value when it's done well, namely when if you are a free player, you can play more and get at least any one thing that's on offer during that period as part of the special season elements. And if you're a paying player and you play more and only if you play more can you get everything.
Exactly.
And I think getting that balance right. But the trouble is, I mean, I don't know if you've experienced this, but my view is that battle passes have got a bum rap, and a lot of players, particularly Steam players, seem to be very antagonistic about battle pass, despite the fact that I honestly believe it's the most valuable way of delivering value to everybody. I mean, what do you think about battle passes in that sense?
I think actually the same, because it's a feature that targets players that don't want to convert and players that convert. There's rewards
Yeah,
for everyone, and I think also when you convert, in the majority of them, like if you look at the Fortnite one, for the longest time, if you converted, you bought the premium one, you get enough currency to purchase the one in the next
yeah.
season. So I think the goal of them has always been about engagement. The thing is, now they're getting a bad rep. I really think it's more of a branding issue than anything else. When you look at it, a battle pass is just seasonal
Yeah.
progression. And now when you look at some games, like I don't know, Marvel Rivals just released their battle pass, you're spending currencies to progress through pages, which is like same system that Fortnite had, etc. But what if they didn't even call it a battle pass? They just call it
Oh,
seasonal progression. That's what I'm thinking when people say like battle passes are gonna die out eventually, players are gonna get sick of them. I don't think so, because at the core of them, they're just another XP bar.
yeah.
And XP bars will never disappear from video games.
But they're delight. They have the potential to create delight, and I mean, for me, I think the thing that's missing in some ways is we've got too many. I think too many designers trying to build movies out of
Mm,
games. We should be building our games more like soap operas. You know, the whole point of a soap opera is that we have a huge array of people who have multiple interlacing arcs of narrative moments, which if we were to design in that way, we'd get more deeper engagement. And the point about a soap opera is that they can last for decades,
yeah,
not
that's
just
true.
next month. And whereas a movie is an hour and a half, 2 hours, in well, maybe 3 hours. Well, it depends on who. Peter Jackson, 4 hours. But you know, it's a fixed amount of time compared to the thousands of hours that people can play. I mean, I regularly play certain games for hundreds of hours. I hate to think how much time I put into Skyrim, but it's got to be nearly 1,000 by now.
Yeah,
Number of replays. Fallout, same principle. I mean, thousands of hours if you put all the Fallout games together. But why do I do that? Because that's my sense of engagement. Would I play a free-to-play version of those? Yeah, Fallout 76 is now very good.
yeah,
It wasn't when
exactly.
it came out. It's now great. But this, I mean, okay, it's got issues with the combat system, very spongy. But other than that, it's a great game. Just as we close up, I just want to go back to one thing. So I think similar to you, having a good idea of where what direction you're going with the monetization makes sense to me early on. And then as you get further down the line, I look at that later stage as we're going to release, as we're ready to release, I look at the packaging. What I mean by
Mhm.
packaging is I've got all of these levers, these systems in place, sinks and sources. I know that these things can be moderated. They can create bonuses, benefits. Kelly refers to it as like a possibility space of how the game operates. But then I want to come up with a way of packaging that in ways that are delightful for the player. So that could be bundles of coins. It could be starter packs. It could be battle passes. But I tend to look at that as we're getting to the stage where we know the retention's there. We now need to make sure the monetization's there. Is that kind of similar to the way you operate? I mean, how do you look at the kind of packaging side of, what stage of the development are you doing that packaging, and what's driving your motivation, your thinking around what packages to offer players for commercial retail?
Right. So um, this really depends on the business model of the game and the type of content that you're trying to monetize. If it's cosmetic or if it's gameplay. If
Yeah,
it's cosmetic, you will usually start with the packaging a little bit early to
yeah,
make sure that you have enough fashion ranges in the game, to make sure that the players can actually find something they can connect with in the
yeah,
game early enough, and that takes time to find out. You need to do a lot of user research for it. It's very different than when you're trying to monetize something systematic. Usually that happens in freemium games where you
yeah,
have gameplay or utility, etc. These ones you can decide them a little bit down the line in
yeah,
terms of pricing. So you start with the packaging a little bit later. in those. I would also recommend not doing them so late, especially when they're so connected with the loop of the game, because you need to also test if the monetization is hindering the player experience
Yeah.
or enhancing it. And
Yeah.
if you end up implementing that late in the production cycle, you run into issues. Maybe you won't have enough time to fix them. So again, if it's gameplay, it's utility. It's not really the packaging you worry about as much as how much it hinders the experience versus benefits.
Yeah.
And usually you try it with even placeholder content, etc., with small tests internally, and then you package it.
Exactly.
If it's cosmetic, you need to start early and you need to have a strategy about it. Cosmetic content is also trickier because as the game goes, you need to start pushing the boundaries of what's available in the game. And so you need to decide a little bit on that journey in terms of like where do we start into how the options the players have versus how we want to increase them. How do we want to make the game more interesting without it losing its visual identity? All of that takes a lot of time to figure out and has a lot of stakeholders in it, more than utility, engagement, and monetization. So you need to engage with artists, narrative writers, creative directors even more involved in it.
Animators. Yeah.
Animators, yeah. But when it comes to the other stuff, it's a bit easier, ironically. But if you mess them up, you'll have like a way
But there's
higher
thankfully
impact.
there's lots of models out there we can kind of borrow from in the nicest possible sense. All right, the ratio of bundled packages of coin. Although no one cares about coins, they care about what coins can get them, and we often forget to frame the purchase. If only I had one more coin, or 1,000 more coins, then I could X. And I think we don't spend enough time thinking about the then I could. The other thing I think we don't spend enough time thinking about is the unboxing of those rewards and purchase items
Exactly.
to make
Yeah.
that feel beautiful and wonderful. If I bought a brand new skin for my gun, I want to feel amazing. How does the game make me feel amazing?
100%. And I think there's a lot of focus. I sometimes see a lot of focus on the IAP packs and like how much the value you're adding there, the conversion between the hard currency to dollar, which is important, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But to be honest, it's fine even to standardize it. And that's something you need to do whenever you're making an economy anyways. You need to benchmark every key game that's in the genre. Look
Yeah.
at their different price packs, look at how much they're selling stuff, and build your economy around that as well. Like if everyone is, let's say, selling the same item in their game for $20 and you jump in and sell it for 60, you must have very good reasons, or you didn't do your homework, or
Yeah.
you're overcharging for something. So I wouldn't worry so much about the IOP pack. They're important, but there's enough research on them. There's enough like benchmarking you can do
Yeah.
to do them. The other stuff, as you mentioned, the experience, the value you're actually giving to the player. Because like if the players want to care, for example, about cosmetics in the game, you want them to connect with it on an identity level. And that's
Yeah.
the hard part. It's not setting the price of the cosmetic at X amount. It's letting the players feel that they connect with the game, connect with the identity of what they're buying. When they purchase it, it's a rewarding experience and they like wearing the thing they got. You need to focus on this win-win mentality. So yeah, I think a lot of time goes into IP packs for a lot of reasons, but the hard stuff is the other part, as you said.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many other areas I'd love to cover, but we run out of time. But I mean, things like I'd love to know how you approach things like drop rates and stuff like that. But I think that's kind of implied already by the way you talked about that kind of time for value principle, which I think kind of covers a lot of the kind of the dark, murky depths of that particular conversation. But instead, I'm going to just ask you one last thing. What's that one thing, one piece of advice you'd give somebody who's coming into game economy design? What's the one thing, one trick, one kind of approach that you think's quintessential to being successful at it?
That's a good one. I should have just one. I think it's something that I mentioned quite a lot of times while we were talking. I think for economy designers, I think remember that you're first a game designer and then you specialize in economy. I think that's the key part. You are part of the creative team. You are part of making the creative experience gets executed, the vision get executed.
Yeah.
So that should be your guiding line. Economy is your tool.
Yeah.
The second thing, if you do that, if you marry those two, you will get a lot of buy-in from the team. If you come over to everyone and just flash your spreadsheet, people aren't going to listen to you, especially other designers. But if you approach designers and tell them like, you have they have, let's say, a nice feature, and if you can tie in a nice reward to it, and the players now will engage more in that feature, now you're part of the team.
Yeah.
Work with the rest of the designers, not just using your Excel. Use your Excel quite a bit. Use your economy table a lot. That's fine. But remember that you're a designer first. I think this is why I also believe game designers end up, economy designers end up designing more interesting features for retention, conversion, and monetization, even better than product managers, even though product managers are focused on business.
Mm.
It's because game economy designers have that creative part. So
Yeah.
that would be my recommendation that I see sometimes people stray away from it. Some economy designers just do balancing, but think of your role more than that. Look at systems and engage with other designers is my recommendation, I guess. And maybe it's a trick too. I don't know. It's just
No, I like it. I think bottom line is that what you're saying is, it's okay to love Excel, but we're making games for players. And if we
yes.
lose sight of that, we lose sight of the economy.
Yeah, 100%. You put it better than me, Oscar. I love it.
I just get to repeat back your words in my form. So, Feras, that's been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time. If people want to find out more about what you do or get into contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, actually. Yeah. So just look at Feras Musmar. Sure, my name will be somewhere in this
Oh, I'll make
podcast.
sure it's in the show notes. They're all good. Absolutely. And I think it's the most common place for people on this particular podcast, of course, not least because a certain social media platform has lost a little credibility, shall we say.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, no. So if you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, share, if you've got comments, if you've got thoughts, you think you've got different views, or if you agree with any of the comments made here, then please make your comments known, because at the end of the day, we're trying to share the common knowledge about making the best possible games for players. At the end of the day, economy design is nothing if it's not about making better game experiences for players. We do not get a sustainable income for a game to be able to make the next game if players don't love what we make. And on that note, thank you very much for listening.